Justin. Justin. Mike. Like this. Okay. Okay, are you hearing anything? You okay, Mike? Okay, fantastic.
I vote for Angela and Paxton.
Yeah, eliminate team. Yes.
Should we send a vote out? I've never seen California. Taking them and putting them back.
Everything. Oh, this is probably not.
Yeah,
Since
I
it's
would say
behind that
the third. Yeah, you mean, just I think this 2 row probably not. All the things before just 1 row before the judge probably not a good idea.
Oh, there we go.
Charlotte here? I should have done something. I never know.
Just. There's Joe.
Okay, welcome to final round of parliamentary tournament at NITOC. We're down to our two final teams, and before we do introductions and announcements, let's open. Father, we thank you for the blessings that we have. The blessings of coming together and using the gift of speech, using the gift of logic and of thinking. God, these are gifts that you give. Lord, would you help us as we train and we learn how to use these gifts, that we would use them to glorify you. Be with these students, would you bless them, help them to think clearly and speak clearly. Lord, would you just help us to enjoy the competition. Father, we ask your blessing on this evening in Jesus' name. Amen. One quick announcement I've been asked is to tell people no food or drink. I guess water is permissible, but nothing else in this auditorium. So if you have anything besides water, we would ask that you would leave with it and take it outside and come back. We will be introducing our judging panel first, and then we'll introduce our debaters. And to introduce our judges, we have two of our important leaders of STOA here to introduce the judges. So Angela Childress and Patsy Butman will introduce our judging panel.
We welcome a very distinguished panel of community judges and parents and alumni. And I'm going to first start with our community judges. And when I call your name, if you would just stand and acknowledge the audience, say hello, we love that. First is Nancy Campbell. Mrs. Nancy Campbell is a Carolina but studied finance at the University of Georgia. She enjoyed a career in sales and marketing and is still involved with events management. She has helped found English and Scottish Country Dance Society and coordinates a society of young people who coordinate and volunteer at premier political events. Mrs. Campbell and her husband Alexander have been married for 28 years and have 4 children. The 3 oldest are NCFCA alumni, and their youngest is still a current competitor. The family has been involved in the league for over 13 years. Nancy has been an invaluable part of Region 8 tournaments, serving in both judge hospitality and judge orientation, as well as judging many final rounds. Nancy's gracious, feminine propriety disguises her inner girl who broke her arm one summer falling out of a tree when her back cake got caught in the tree branches. Danielle Baker Gibbs. Danielle Gibbs is a native of Greenville, South Carolina, and is raised in Greer, where she attended Riverside High School. After obtaining her political degree in political science at University College, she worked for 4th District Congressman Jim Bennett from 2002 to 2005 as a constituent service representative. In 2009, Danielle became regional director of Women's Upstate Operations. She currently serves as the Upstate Manager for the United States Senator Ken Scott, who was appointed to the U.S. Senate in December of 2012 by Governor Nikki Haley. In this capacity, she serves as the eyes and ears of the Senator in Greenville, Spartanburg, and Union counties, and oversees internal operations for the region. Danielle is a graduate of Leadership Greenville Class 34 and has been honored as one of the Greenville's Business Magazine's best and brightest on the 35. She and her husband Bill are busy raising 3 children in the greatest city in the South. Presently serves as magistrate judge for Hendersonville, North Carolina. After graduating from Campbell University School of Law, he worked as an attorney in general law practice before his current position. Brent has formerly served as board member for the E&C Williams, Southern Appalachian Biodiversity Project in Ashland, North Carolina, and Carolina Mountain Land Conservancy in Henderson, North Carolina. Brent attends Reformed Presbyterian Church in Hendersonville and enjoys playing alien pipes, trout fishing, hunting, horseback riding, and horses. Holds a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo. As you can see, we have a very diverse team. Wendy Manning. Wendy graduated from Washington University with a BS in Business Administration. She then moved to Washington, D.C., and worked as a staff assistant to the Chief Legal Counsel for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee under Senator Jesse Helms. Wendy took a break from politics while she and her husband Tim raised 5 children. Once her children were older, Wendy served as chairman of the Greenville County Republican Party. In 2008, Wendy was elected as representative to the South Carolina State House. She continues to serve in that capacity. Wendy is currently the chairman of the Greenville County Legislative Delegation and also serves as the chairman of the South Carolina Republican Women's Caucus. Her favorite pastime continues to be at Grandma State. And then finally, Jonathan Peel. We have another Jonathan Peel is now in his 15th year as a coach, having joined the Charlotte Mountain School faculty as director of forensics in 2013. Over his career, his students have claimed 8 state championships and 40 qualifications for NSPA nationals. During his tenures at East Chapel Hill High School, Manchester Essex Regional High School, and Harper School, the students advanced to late elimination rounds in nearly every major tournament, including Wake Forest, Yale, Emory, Stanford, Harvard, UC Berkeley, the TOC, and NCFL Nationals. In 2007, 11, and 13, the students reached final round of Congress and Dramatic Interpretation at NSDA Nationals. Field holds ABS in Political Science from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
Okay, thank you very much, community judges. So thank you, Karen, and alumni judges. We're delighted that you're able to serve us. So we have Sherry Beers. So Sherry. Sherry is the wife and mother of 7, ages 7 to 28. Okay, that's remarkable right there. She's been participating in home education for 19 years. And she says, my family is my work experience. So I like that. She's been a part of the debate community for the past year. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. So we have Felicia Stuckle. She says, I've been married to Gerald Stuckle Jr. for almost 21 years. Together we have one son, Raymond, who's finishing up the 11th grade. We've homeschooled for 9 years. She says, I have a bachelor's degree in business administration from Southern Wesleyan University. Also, I have over 20 years experience in corporate accounting. My husband and I own a trucking company that covers the Southeast. Her comments are, my own experience in high school speech and debate spurred my passion for the benefits of learning to speak in a public setting at a young age. So thank you very much, Alicia. We have our alumni, Jake Buxton. He says that his family has 2 wonderful parents and 2 very talented siblings. He also, his education is currently, he's a junior at Truman State University. He debated in the Truman State University LD policy team. He also graduated from STOA in 2013. He's competed for 3 years in STOA. He competed in duo, original inter, Lincoln Douglas debate, and parliamentary debate. He was the 2-time Missouri State champion in Lincoln Douglas debate. He ranked 16th in the nation at the 2013 NITOC. So thank you very much, Jay. I think we may have had a change on one of our judges. Originally, I had slated Daniel Gert. Does someone have a profile on the additional judge? The taxi judges? Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. The way we might have you also stand if I miss one of the judges. Did I miss anything? Yes. Debbie? Yes, let me introduce you. I don't have this in front of me, but let me introduce Debbie Snyder. Debbie actually introduced STOA into the Virginia area, and so we're delighted with that. And she's been involved with speech and debate for multiple years, and in the homeschooling community, I believe, for about 20 years. Is that about right, Debbie? 27, excuse me. Okay, thank you very much, Debbie. Also serves on our speech committee, has been incredibly active as a coach for both all 3 parliamentary debate, team policy debate, as well as speech. So thank you very much, Debbie. I apologize for not having that. So I also wanted to take an opportunity to introduce our timekeeper for tonight. And so we have here Josiah Mickey, so raise your hand. We want to double check that the competitors can all see your hand signals real quickly, Josiah. All see okay? Gotcha. Do you have any instructions you need to offer talk to the competitors so they know.
We'll be counting down as usual. There'll be no hand slaps, so please keep track of protect the time yourself. You'll notice the 6-minute mark and the 1-minute mark. And I'll be offering hand signals all the minutes, 30 seconds, as well as 10-second mark. Timer will go off audibly at the 7-minute mark. Okay?
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so let's introduce our competitors in this final round. On the government side, from the Club of Verb for the great state of Washington, we have, let's see, there's Charles Bay, right? You will be member of Gov. And we have Josiah Pop, you will be Prime Minister, representing the government. On the opposition, we have from Vix's Fide in the great state of Texas, we have Brent Eldridge. And you will be a member of government and a member of opposition, that matters. And we have Bailey Eldridge, and you will be the leader of opposition. So those are your debaters. We'll allow them to shake hands, and they will begin. Thank you all.
So awkwardly quiet. Now are all of the judges ready?
As each of you speak, could you please give us your name and which speaker you are?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You know, if it helps, I can put my name tag outside of my coat. Just like Bob. Oh, this is something that both teams are a little unclear about. Are we asking for judging philosophies, or was that summed up in the paper? The paper is read by the former officials. Or are we not asking for judging philosophies?
Ask away. Do you have anything you'd like to add? Philosophy. Starting from here that way. I love good, clear organization and good class. And impact. Same.
We'll see. Give me voting issue.
This is. Anyone else? Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Both the oppositions ready?
Absolutely.
And Charles?
Yes.
All right, and all the judges. Because this is my last chance to say this in reference to former debater and my past audience. Yeah, it never worked for me to either. All right, let's start. Just because you have the right to something in America doesn't mean that you have the further right to steal it from your neighbor. Unfortunately, this notion that we can all run around philanthropically stealing from one another has paraded American society to the core, resulting in one of the worst pieces of legislation to ever hit the floor of the House, Senate, or the President's desk, which isn't actually the floor. So first of all, let's do some resolutional analysis. What is today's resolution? It may surprise you. We're going with resolution number 3, which is the resolution 1, the United States federal government should repeal the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act of 2000. Yeah, that's actually the resolution today. So first off, let's go with some resolutional analysis because this resolution is literally repeal Obamacare. So first off, let's go through some resolutional analysis. We'll define the Affordable Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act of 2009 as the technical term for the worst piece of legislation and biggest socialist commie monstrosity that ever hit the floor of the Senate, or the President's desk, or the House of Representatives. The only piece of legislation in U.S. history to measure on the Richter scale once they hit the floor because it's so huge. So let's move on and define what this resolution is. What kind of resolution is this? This is a policy resolution. It is asking us to take a specific course of action as the government, and it says should in the resolution, and it's providing a specific course of action. So we're going to be debating today whether or not Obamacare should stay in place. Now, I'd like to also point out the burden of the negative team, or actually the opposition team, Their opposition is to defend Obamacare in this round because they have to basically do the reverse of the resolution, which is the United States federal government should not repeal the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act of 2009. The burden for us is to prove that it should be repealed. The burden of the opposition is to prove that it should not be repealed. So also let's move on to some criteria for this debate round. The criteria, first and foremost, will be the constitution of this round because it is the supreme law of the land and it's not for any unreasonable purpose. Second of all, we like to secondarily consider net benefits. So first off, let's go to the plan. The plan is we will do the resolution. Again, we will do the resolution, we will repeal Obamacare. Let's move on and talk about advantage number one of repealing the Affordable Care Act, the worst irony to ever exist. Subpoint A, advantage number one is individual rights. Again, individual rights. Respecting the Constitution is not something we do for fun, it's not something that we do to philosophically tip our hats to the founding fathers, it is the defense of our way of life. And when we have strayed from it, it has resulted in the worst chapters of American history. Subpoint A here is individual mandate. Again, the individual mandate of Obamacare. It forces people to buy Obamacare-approved health care plans on state or federal exchanges, and if they don't, well, they pay a fine. This is like, I'm pretty sure if King George was around today, you'd be pretty enthralled to know that he could tax the patriots and the colonists for not buying tea. Subpoint B is personal control is best. Again, personal control is superior because when we're talking about free market competition, which is empirically the best system of government and the best economic system, when we're talking about that, the lost competition, because government sanctions some plans but not others, results in subpoint C. First of all, it is immoral. It is absolutely immoral. One of my favorite political commentators, Ben Shapiro, once wrote in his book, How Leftism Violates All 10 of the Commandments. He wrote, the government's entire purpose is to use its monopoly on the use of force to enforce rights to life, liberty, and property. As soon as government goes beyond that, it is by definition, according to the Declaration of Independence, illegitimate government. Impact one is loss of doctors. Again, loss of doctors. Because of the lost competition between healthcare providers, fewer doctors are available as they get priced out of the market by corrupt medical practitioners and basically federally sanctioned healthcare plans. The internalizing factor of this is the fact that once we start losing doctors, maybe access to healthcare or the right to healthcare is a lot better, but you don't actually get the healthcare when it comes down to it. Advantage number two is religious freedom. Again, religious freedom. Subpoint A here requires birth control. Again, requires coverage of birth control. Whether you're talking about the morning after pill, the week after pill, or any sort of contraceptive or basically quasi-abortion pill or medication, Obamacare makes people, basically, like literally, forces people to provide those in forms of taxes and fees. This infringes upon the religious institutions that found this country. Subpoint B is forcing immorality. Again, forcing immorality. Let's just say for a minute that it's objective that abortion is wrong. But even if that wasn't the case, the kind of forcing on this immorality leads to the degradation of American society by destroying religious institutions upon which philanthropic thought and action rely. Also, this results in lawsuits by the hundreds, literally hundreds of lawsuits have been levied against the Affordable Care Act, which wastes time, which wastes money, which wastes energy, and all of that could be used to be putting in the private sector or charity or anything else aside from fighting the worst thing on earth. So also let's move on to the subpoint C. It's a step towards tyranny. Again, it's a step towards tyranny. Maybe this is a little, some people would deem this irrational or extremist to talk about, but let's remember, first goal of Mao in China was to ensure the eradication of religion. And once you start destroying religious freedom, it destroys the fabric that holds the morals of the United States together. Because when men are left to rule themselves, they fail. And that's why we've seen Soviet Russia, from Mao's China to Pol Pot, Cambodia, to any other dictatorship on the face of the earth seeking to end religious freedom. The impact of this is the violation of rights. Forcing people to violate their conscience and provide what is essentially abortion services against their will, against their own religion, would be enshrined in American law. Literally is enshrined in American law. Advantage number three is medical crisis averted. Again, medical crisis averted. Subpoint A is bad grades. I mean that in the most literal sense possible. Doctors in America have graded Obamacare, and 46% of them give them a D to an F. When you have nearly half of the doctors in America disapproving of Obamacare, it should be a pretty good indicator that it's not exactly the best thing on earth. Also, let's move on and talk about subpoint B. Subpoint B is emergency room SWAT. Again, emergency room SWAT. Even assuming that people do not buy state-approved healthcare plans, that ensures that our emergency rooms are swamped by people coming in without health insurance and basically destroys some people, or destroys the opportunity for people that have really, really bad emergencies to deal with. Subpoint 3, or actually subpoint C, is they earn less. There is literally a section of Obamacare which appoints a council to ensure that doctors are paid less in the name of fairness. Okay, fine. There's literally a council in Obamacare which sees to it that doctors are paid less than they're actually supposed to. The impact of this is doctor shortage. Again, doctor shortage. Now, if we were in America to not have doctors, that would obviously be a pretty bad thing, but here's some numbers for you. Almost all of the doctors in America right now are 55 or older. That literally means that they're going to be retiring soon. And Obamacare is disincentivizing new doctors from entering the field because it is so expensive and you must be forced to do things against your will all the time. This impact is no health coverage no matter how good it is. And no health coverage no matter how good it is. The medical crisis in America is coming. Just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Thank you.
Hello. I have to get used to this without having an echo. All right. Are the judges ready? Out of all the jokes of Obamacare, I'm surprised the government team is one of the most important ones. That was actually by a Democrat themselves. We're going to have to pass the plan to know what's in it. And at the end of the day, even though Obamacare is thousands of pages of terrible stuff, the intent of it was good, was to provide better health care to the United States citizens. And the interesting thing is that if we actually spend the time to go through and read it, there's actually, shockingly, some provisions in there that are actually what Americans would support if you asked them outside of Obamacare or the Patient Affordable Care Act. Would you agree with this? And we look at that idea, that's exactly what the opposition team believes in today's debate round. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. At least that's what we say in the staff. Now, I'm going to be going through some resolution announcements before I get any further. The first one was that of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, the ACA, or the ACA for short, or Obamacare, if you want to use a slang term. Any of them work. The end of the day, that's basically what it is. We agree with its definition, although not the communist, the long one full of rhetoric, but the point that this was being obviously what we all know with Obamacare. The second thing we want to add, so, is a definition of repeal. Repeal means revoking or annulling a congressional act completely, getting rid of the entire bill and all the provisions in it. Just make sure that's clarified. Obviously, we're not being agree. The next point here is that this is a policy resolution. We also agree to that. Now, they're really underneath the reverse of the resolution. I'm actually going to disagree with this on this one. What we as the opposition team have to do is oppose the affirmative team and their policies. In today's debate round, consider debating policies. Let's figure out what the best policy for Americans are, which is why the opposition team can be providing a counter plan, a counter policy that believes this is better than what they're providing, and it's not the same thing. Now, as far as their constitution and that benefits goes, we'll agree with that. With that said, let me get to this counter plan. This will be passed by Congress and the president. Mandate 1 is repeal Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, but keep the following provisions, which are in Obamacare, in place. Subpoint A, young adults staying on their parents' plan until they turn 26. Subpoint B, ban insurance from denying coverage to people with pre-existing conditions. Subpoint C, Medicare donut hole fix. Now people want to talk about. Subpoint D, the accountable care organizations. And the final one is tax credits to small businesses who provide coverage. This will be enforced by the Health and Human Services and any other necessary agency. My local federal budget, timeline, blah, 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 terms and conditions apply. Next point, let's look at the extensions from the last team. Now, their next point is that we don't just tip our hats at Founding Fathers, which is great because I did bring a hat, and I think that's actually Lincoln. So we don't have to just tip our hats at Founding Fathers. We do believe in individual rights, which is why we should keep the original provisions that I just mentioned in place. At the end of the day, we get all of those disadvantages that were brought up against Obamacare. None of that applies to the opposition team's case, but we keep the provisions that actually are benefiting Americans today, that actually make the reforms necessary. As much as there's thousands of pages of additional gunk and junk that we don't need anymore, our policy is better and it preserves that and it's actually helping Americans. As far as personal control superior, I'll talk about that on accountable care organizations or ACOs. And as far as other points about loss of doctors, birth control, forcing morality, obviously we're repealing those parts of it, but we're keeping the following provisions in place. So as far as all the core contentions went, they don't have an argument opposition ballot. But there's a few reasons why we should go to opposition still. The first contention in favor of the opposition team's counter plan is needed health reform. Needed health reform. Subpoint A is dependent coverage. The Department of Labor said 30% of young adults are uninsured, and that's higher than any other age group. This is because they have the lowest rate of access. Young adults like me who are entering college don't have a full-time job that comes with medical benefits attached to them.
Many teenagers or young adults underneath the age of 26 are working part-time jobs. We don't have the same access to healthcare coverage that our parents and older Americans do, and that's caused us to be uninsured. By keeping the provisions that allow Americans to stay on their parents' plans until they turn 26, we benefit Americans in that way because it's also pretty popular, as we hear in my next contention. But subpoint B is pre-existing conditions coverage. Pre-existing conditions coverage. Now, right now, currently, there's 13 million Americans who are non-elderly that are denied due to pre-existing conditions. Meaning, if you had cancer, even in your past, and you've already beat it, you're still beat down by insurance companies who believe that that pre-existing coverage is a risk to them. And that's according to Commonwealth Funds, as far as we know from that statistic. In addition, 21% get turned down. They're either turned down, charged an increased cost, or given a plan that doesn't cover their needs. So for Americans that have pre-existing health or pre-existing conditions, some of which is not even that person's fault, this policy keeping that specific provision in place would help them greatly. Subpoint C is the donut hole, because it's not just the favors and some food analogies, it's also the government. Now, what the donut hole basically says is that enrollees are financially dependent for this gap. You're covered initially for a certain percentage on prescription drugs. Then there's a part where you have to pay for it until you reach a certain limit. So let's say the first $500 of your prescription drug coverage is paid for. Then you've got a gap of maybe $500 until you hit your $1,000 limit, at which point they'll pay for whatever left. It's a lot more than $500, so I pretty much can guarantee with that. Now, the Department of Health and Human Services said about 1/4 of Part D enrollees hit the donut hole and stop taking their medications, which means there's Americans on Medicare that are not actually getting coverage or their prescription drugs that they need for their health. Subpoint D is decreased health, and that costs our workforce about $576 billion annually, not even taking account the toll that takes on people's lives when we have a decreased quality of life due to health concerns. Second contention is popular provisions. Popular provisions. 61% favors young adults staying on their parents' insurance according to a Reuters poll. 82% of Americans believe that pre-existing condition protection is a good idea. 81% believe that the donut hole should be covered, and 88% believe in tax credits to small businesses. All of this is supported by the American public, and none of this harms individual rights or the Constitution applies any of the prompts for granting last point. That brings me to my third contention, ACOs, or Accountable Care Organizations. What this is it's 7 pages of the law, and what it does is it provides incentives, quality benchmarks, to ensure that doctors are actually benefited by keeping their patients out of the hospitals and taking care of chronically ill and managing their symptoms. This is slated to save Medicare $940 million within the first 4 years. And there's freedom for patients in that they can even go outside these networks of doctors and hospitals, and they have the freedom to do so. So looking at the policies that have been presented, yes, Obamacare, we can roast it all we want. At the end of the day, there's some diamonds in the rough that ought to be protected, and that's what the opposition team and the government team doesn't. Thank you.
Everybody hear me fine? Let's go ahead and begin. It's going to be very interesting. I'd like to go in and just begin by responding to the arguments that they brought up. Specifically looking at their account plan, we agree with all of their agreements to our first definitions and resolutional analysis, obviously. So let's go ahead and talk about the arguments. It was a little bit confusing at first because it was repeal and then key, which you can't really do at the same time, but let's go real quick. They talked about how they're forcing companies to include these pre-existing laws where these companies, the insurance companies have to include insurance for the insurance policies that they already have when they're redundant. My response to this is that they are forcing companies. They are forcing companies. Instead of a free market approach, they are requiring these companies to keep these current insurance policies by keeping these amendments or provisions under Obamacare, which is not anything which I'm going to be talking about later. The idea behind this, the reason this is bad is because of the Constitution, which they agree with that the Constitution is something that should be upheld in today's debate around. But when the federal government is going over its bounds and forcing a company to require, insurance for these pre-existing laws instead of making up their own decisions on what the best is for the company and for the person themselves, you lose constitutional rights. Yes, one of your questions.
You would agree that even in a free market. You would agree that even in a free market, we still put regulations on businesses to provide some protection for customers.
We do put bad for the company. The Constitution allows for the federal government to deal with interstate commerce and environmental protections and constitutional stuff like that, but it does not allow for insurance companies, it doesn't allow the federal government to require insurance companies to have insurance for these pre-existing plans. Basically, they're saying Obamacare, get rid of Obamacare, but keep the part that says add these requirements, the requirements that are already there. So my second response is that these are pre-existing conditions, which we're going to be talking about next under a PERM and sort of a counter plan. It's going to be a very confusing. So let's go on to the PERM. Is that the negative team hasn't really given you they haven't really given you an example why you should be voting against the government team. They just said that you should be voting for the opposition team because of the provisions. So the counter plan is everything that they brought up in their counter plan except for the pre-existing requirements. So we allow the 26-year-old kids to be on their family, or kids to be on their family plans until they're 26. We allow for the prescription drugs, but we're not going to be requiring this because it leads to anti-federalism and in turn tyranny, which is the next step towards tyranny. So the reason we have this counter plan, I have two reasons for this, two justifications. First of all, as we discussed on the first Prime Minister's speech and the Leader of Opposition speech, is that the Constitution is a criterion for today's debate round. So at the end of the day, who can best uphold the Constitution is the one that you should be voting for, because that's one of the the criteria that we brought up. So this is a counter plan, it is a constructive speech. I have the ability to change our mandates because it is constructive so that we can best uphold the Constitution while still having all of the benefits that the negative team or the opposition team has tried to bring up with their counter plan. The second justification is that of the free market, the insurance companies will have the option of denying or accepting more people not under the pre-existing conditions are going to make their own decisions. The government should not be in there requiring companies to do specific things. That's not what the Constitution allows for. The Constitution is being violated right here, I believe, under the 10th Amendment, which says that any powers that are not left up to the federal government is specifically required to the states. They go above their bounds, they go above the 10th Amendment. So at the end of the day, what the government team does with the original plan and the counter plan and the PERM and all these technical terms is that we have the best option for the day by repealing Obamacare, except leaving the kids that go up to 26 staying on the family plan, the prescription drugs, and everything that is not the pre-existing law requirements for insurance companies. We do all of that, we do all of the benefits, except we don't take another step towards tyranny. And I'd like to run an advantage talking about how federalism will be restored, talking about how it is being harmed right now, and we're taking more and more steps towards tyranny by allowing the government to take over companies, take over states without having any repercussions or stopping them from doing that. So the advantage that federalism restored, first subpoint A is that they are currently outside their boundaries. They're currently outside their boundaries. If you go for the opposition team or the current system, you're outside their boundaries because the federal government is taking over states and insurance companies by forcing them to do so. Yes, second degree.
So you would agree that there are provisions in Obamacare that are useful for Americans?
Yes, but not the one that allows the requirements for the insurance companies to pay insurance for pre-existing plans. Let's say cell phone providers, when you switch plans, you don't keep the same phone, you don't keep the same system, you completely switch over. It's not how it works. The federal government should not be in charge of forcing insurance companies to upload pre-existing plans under Obamacare. That's part that they are repealing. Basically, they're saying, we're going to repeal this over all the things you have in the current system. While Obamacare was in place, you still have to uphold because when the federal government, we say you have to do this. So subpoint A was that they're outside their boundaries. Subpoint B is that it's a step towards tyranny. Step towards tyranny. They're outside of their bounds on the 10th and 11th Amendment. I'm not sure if it's the 11th Amendment. Basically, they don't have the right to do this. They're taking more and more steps to tyranny. We violate federalism, which is the idea of two houses in the government, which is federal government and state government, where they are equal and they have tension with each other. When that is violated and the federal government takes over the states, all we see is the federal government continuing on this path of taking over states, requiring them to do things that is not in their constitutional provisions, that is not constitutionally allowed. So at the end of the day, the impact is that we're closer to anti-tyranny, we're closer to removing tyranny in the United States. Basically, Obama has stepped in has violated federalism, we're taking that step back, keeping some of the provisions the opposition team has asked for and said are good, however, we don't require the unconstitutional part. As I talk about net benefits and constitutional both criteria upheld by both teams, if whichever team can uphold net benefits and the criteria of the Constitution being upheld should be voted for at the end of the day. So I please I should vote for because we keep some of the provisions while upholding the Constitution and creating net benefits. Thanks so much.
Okay, all the judges ready? Okay, and the government team. And I'll go ahead and begin. I know that the opposition team has an uphill battle when it comes to trying to convey to a group of mostly conservative people that Obamacare is a good thing, almost about as difficult as explaining to 12-year-olds that Justin Bieber isn't a good singer. However, what I would like to address is that there are some diamond in the rough pieces with the Obamacare that we should keep in place, as the government team seemed to agree with us in their last speech. However, what they wanted to do was take advantage of what we provided in the analysis that as the opposition team we came up with and try to take it on as their own to be able to fulfill a resolution that asks them to repeal it completely. Some people would call this a permutation and debate. I kind of like to call it plagiarism. Just kidding, guys. So what I'd like to go ahead and go through is the contentions brought up by the last speaker and just explain to you why them trying to take ownership of the plan that we came up with really doesn't uphold the resolution to repeal Obamacare. As they laid out in their first speech, they've been pretty contradictory throughout the last two speeches. So first and foremost, we talked about a contention that forcing companies, or pretty much insurance companies, to provide coverage to people with pre-existing conditions is unconstitutional, and how we need to let the free market do its thing. My first response is that there's no free market alternative. Again, there's no free market alternative. Whether you vote government or opposition, government voting for them would mean that we go back to pre-Obamacare existence. What that means is that you have 50 broken up states having their own broken and fragile systems of healthcare versus the opposition team that still allows for a unified federal healthcare benefit without keeping the restrictions in place that we deem bad by the government team in the very beginning of this round. My second response here is that it's favored by most Americans. As my partner pointed out by, yes, sorry, I'm so sorry.
Okay, so my question is, you agree that this entire round is based upon Constitution and net benefits, right?
Oh yeah, I could agree to that. So let's go ahead and talk about Constitution. The Constitution, I'm pretty sure that was the document that said we the people. And we the people want to keep the benefits that my partner laid out in her first speech. We have numerous rules saying that the majority of Americans want to keep those 5 exceptions in place, regardless of how bad Obamacare as a whole is whenever it comes to having every single congressman represented getting different funding for millions of different things in that big giant book that we like to call the bill. I would call it more like an encyclopedia. Next, let's talk about their point that they said that the companies, we should be forcing companies. Believe it or not, companies weren't that effective when it came to Obamacare being put in place. According to the Mercer organization, the Mercer Foundation, between 2014 and 2015, when most of Obamacare was implemented, we saw no difference between business representation of providing health care to their business and their employees. So what we can see here is that the businesses haven't really been affected by Obamacare in the long term, and we haven't really forced them to do anything that they weren't doing beforehand. So whenever it comes to we can't be forcing businesses, Obamacare really didn't change that. However, those points that they brought up about the religious discrimination due to the birth control benefits or benefits provided by Obamacare, they essentially don't apply here because neither team are advocating for that in this debate round. Next, they brought up a permutation, which is a big debate word for we're going to steal your Pop-Tart. Meaning, what the government team wanted to do was take our plan because we didn't necessarily negate their plan of repealing it completely, therefore they wanted to take ownership of it. However, my partner's entire speech was about how we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater and we shouldn't repeal it completely, which brings me to a few other responses. My first response here is, yes, go ahead.
So, you say that we stole your plan. Did you kind of do the same thing?
Absolutely not. You guys repeal it completely, we leave in certain certain conditions. That's two completely different plans. They're not mutually exclusive. Next, let's talk about my response to that of a moving target. The issue is if you agree to them being able to take our Pop-Tart, what we can see is that my partner wasted her entire speech negating their plan with an alternative, which means that who knows, in the next speech they might get up and say, let's all pay for everyone in this room to go to Disney World like Oprah. However, that might be a great idea, that there's really no way for us to debate. And what that leads to is a decreased educational debate, because we were very clear and upfront that what we wanted to provide as a counter plan and how it clashed with their plan specifically. And on top of that, let's go to their definitions that they brought up / their mandate. They literally said repeal Obamacare. That's what they were trying to advocate at the beginning of this round. On top of that, if you do try to pass a government team's ballot off of the preposition that they're going to take control of our plan and pass everything minus that one exception, all of a sudden we see this issue that they're no longer upholding the resolution, which for the government team was to repeal Obamacare, which they would not do underneath that. Yes, I'll take the last question.
Two questions really quick back to back.
Yes.
You would agree that your original mandate was to repeal it and then keep the 2 amendments, correct?
No, we were saying that we keep the 5 amendments and we get rid of the rest. So it's not repealing
Original mandate, like tag, was repeal, and then you added some more. By our mandates of repealing it and then leaving the 2 extra provisions, we're still topical because we still repeal it, correct?
You do not repeal it completely, which is the burden that you agreed to at the beginning of this round. Next, let's talk about and once they agree that burden, then myself will as the government team. That was clear enough. Next, let's talk about the point about how it's not constitutional. And that's talking about the one exception that they're trying to leave. Trying to take away from our plan, which is the one about the pre-existing conditions. A couple of responses here. One, the Supreme Court has already ruled it constitutional. The law of the land, or the main Supreme Court who is in charge of ruling these constitutional law, has ruled pretty much everything constitutional, minus that birth control mandate within the bill, and that's still up for discussion currently, and neither do the bill. Sorry, I didn't have to time. Next, my second response here, so the first thing is that we're not violating the Constitution, therefore their advantage of the Federation restored doesn't really come back. My second response here is that it was a contradiction. At the very beginning of this round, they got up here and talked about how bad Obamacare is and how it completely violates the Constitution. Now all of a sudden, all of Obamacare minus 4 amendments is unconstitutional. Where is the right line here? Where is the government team really stand? We see this moving target throughout the debate round, causing the opposition team to have to move around with their moving target. We don't really know what we're supposed to be debating now, which is why I asked you to negate their idea that they can take control of our counter plan and take it as their own. Last and finally, I'd like to bring up one final point here, is that workforce business sickness equated to $570 billion annually, and that will be able to decrease whenever you provide for the health care benefits that the opposition team advocates for and not progressively. Thank you very much. All right. Judges ready? All this talk of Pop-Tarts is making me hungry, even though I just had dinner. But the one thing I'll add is also food related. An apple a day keeps the doctor away, and if that fails, the opposition team's policy is here to help you. And that's our point in today's debate round. At the end of the day, there's no use throwing out the baby with the bathwater and completely repealing Obamacare. I'm going to be walking through 3 voting issues, or 3 reasons why we should be voting for the opposition team, or you should be voting for the opposition team. I don't get a vote. I'm kind of biased. First voting issue is the wonderful world of debate here. It's not quite the happiest place on earth, but it's one of the places that you've got to go to in your lifetime, and even the community judges are going to get that tasting this. Now, in my speech, I brought up a counter plan, which is a counter to the policy the government team presented. They agreed when I said the definition of repeal was to completely repeal Obamacare. We said that we repeal Obamacare excluding the following provisions, and then listed them. We're not getting rid of it all, then instituting new policies. We're keeping provisions that were already in Obamacare in effect. We're not completely repealing all of the bill. Now look at this idea that brings me something. A, the government must repeal. Their job as the government team is to uphold the resolution. When they stood up and said, we stand resolved that we should repeal the Affordable Care Act, that was what they were saying. When they said they were really going to pass the resolution, they meant they were going to completely get rid of, as per its definition for repeal from your Webster Dictionary, they were going to completely get rid of it. They are no longer upholding the resolution if what they're doing is they're keeping provisions in place. They're no longer completely removing the policy. So that's why B underneath here is amending to perfection. Now, at the end of the day, this goes back to what my part was mentioning in her moving target speech. If we could keep debating, the opposition team could keep finding reasons why we should keep this provision, that provision, etc. And the government team could keep getting up and saying, we're going to now do all that stuff too. The end of the day, that basically meant that my entire first speech was unnecessary and useless because at the end of the day, they were being passing it anyways, minus one provision. It kept moving the target and the goal, and in a debate round, the government team needs to stand for something, stand resolve for something, and they stand resolve, they were completely repeal the law here. They made this moving target where anytime they feel like it, they can amend their policy to make it better, and that creates unfairness because I wasted my entire speech on something they were willing to agree to. Subpoint C here is the best policy for Americans. The goal of policy making, as many of you who are obviously involved in politics as the judges know, is to find the best policy to help your constituents that are going to benefit the people that are here having to work through their own lives, that need health insurance. That was the main reason. For those that are young adults that need to be having coverage from their parents' plan and they're working part-time and getting their way through school, to those that have pre-existing conditions, chronic illnesses that they're fighting currently, those who have had cancer in the past that need to be benefited from that and still be able to have affordable coverage. That's why we're looking at these policies. The government teams should completely repeal it. The opposition teams believe that the best policy is to keep these diamonds and rough in place to protect those Americans with those interests. Now that brings me to voting issue 2, shine bright like a diamond, because we keep talking about diamonds. It just makes sense to find a small word that went along with it. So shine bright like a diamond has 2 subpoints. Subpoint A is needed health reform. Again, I brought in my first speech, there were some parts before Obamacare that needed to be amended. We don't have a completely perfect system. We had still high costs for healthcare. We had many people that didn't have any coverage. And while Obamacare has been extreme, it's thousands of pages, there were a couple pages, 7 pages in the Obamacare organization, a couple of parts of pages dedicated to them that we're keeping in place that are benefiting America, that were needed for young adults, the elderly, and those that had pre-existing coverage, as well as small businesses to encourage production on their part, to also have those good provisions in place. Subpoint B underneath this is popular provisions. Also, when you take into account is that all of the provisions that the opposition teams keep in place were popular with the American public. They were areas where, if you remove the stigma of Obamacare that we spent the entire first speech roasting, they actually believed that this was good policies, good ideas that were going to benefit them, their family members, their loved ones, their friends. And that's why we need to keep these provisions in place. But I'm talking again and again and again about something the government teams already agreed to. Subpoint C is that we're saving money in Medicare. Okay, going back to the donut hole, that was $940 million, I believe, that saved at Medicare spend, which is what some of your taxpayer money does go to. It's a government-run program. Saving money in that program is a big deal because it's benefiting all Americans. And subpoint D is, again, all of the harms that they brought in their first week about how terrible it was to doctors, all of that's still solved by an opposition ballot. It's not addressed if you vote for the government team and completely repeal it, which was what they were asked during the resolution to do. My third voting issue is net beneficial and uphold the Constitution. The end of the day, most net beneficial policy isn't completely scrapping the bill, it's finding those provisions that are actually useful, that are already in place, and allowing them to continue working and benefiting American taxpayers and those that need those temporary health reforms. In addition, to uphold the Constitution, because all the provisions that have been labeled questionable are kept out of the bill. They were appealed along with the rest of the section. We kept in most of our parts. So for these 3 voting issues, I strongly encourage you to take a second look at Obamacare and then you keep certain provisions in place. Thank you.
Opposition ready? And all the judges. That's cool. Alrighty. Let's start. The criteria for this round is first Constitution, second net benefits. This was agreed upon by both teams at the beginning of this round. And now they're asking you to vote against our plan because it's not topical. Well, they should have run a stock usage criteria if they wanted that to happen. That was new in the last speech. Because here's the thing. If you believe that moving targets are bad, my entire first speech was wasted because they ran a counter plan. They came into this room to, asking to debate the complete repeal of Obamacare. They don't want to do that. And so if there really is abuse happening here, it's both ways. Even though abuse is a bad word to use here because it's actually kind of educational for us to think on the spot. But if there is a moving target here, it's on both the opposition and the government side because my entire first speech was wasted and then she said that her entire first speech was wasted. And so all the impact calculus and everything that mattered came out of the second 2 speeches, which by the way, are still constructive. Now they agree to a few key points. They agree that the round needs to be decided first and foremost by the Constitution. That is a key admission. That's why the government should garner your ballot. So let's look at a few arguments here. First of all, this argument about topicality doesn't matter because they really should have run a stock issues criteria if they wanted that to happen. Second of all, repeal most of it. That's not exactly what the resolution is asking us to debate. Forgive me if you adopt like you did. Second of all, decrease education on both sides. If really targets really are a bad thing, then we should vote against the opposition and the government team. Actually, I'm now asking for a double loss. Don't do that. Let's move on to what we just talked about. Voting issue number 1, Constitution first. Again, voting issue number 1 is the Constitution first. First point under this is individual rights. There's literally only one thing in this debate round that matters anymore. Does forcing companies to provide Medicare or provide healthcare for pre-existing conditions a violation of the Constitution? Yes. According to the criteria, the counter plan under the permutation is better because it avoids any constitutional violations, which they agree is the most important issue of the round. We preserve the rights of businesses and individuals to determine what kinds of care they're willing to provide. That is constitutional. No? She said that it was ruled constitutional by the Supreme Court. I think she might be a little confused here because, well, let's be honest, Obamacare is really confusing. The Supreme Court ruled that the taxes, quote-unquote taxes under Obamacare, were constitutional, and then they brought out the Hobby Lobby case against the Supreme Court. Never has the pre-existing coverage been ever approved by the Supreme Court of the United States. That's what we're talking about. That is the only thing that matters anymore. Does that provision violate the Constitution? Absolutely yes. And the government team avoids it by adapting just like they adapted. Second point under this is violation of the Constitution. Oh wait, no, that wasn't the second point. And also, this does impact into a violation of the Constitution. Go through my analysis and Charles's analysis about what happens when you violate the Constitution, whether it is Maoist China, or Pol Pot Cambodia, or Soviet Russia. That is the biggest impact of this debate round because it leads to degradation of all society, whether or not you need healthcare or not. And basically, that impact calculus means the government ballot is absolutely warranted. Second point under this is religious freedom. Now, there's not really a debate on both sides, but we garner individual freedom, religious freedom, and third of all, states' rights, which is, I don't think, something that they've argued about. If we really need regulations on things, it's the power of the states to do that under the 10th Amendment, because any delegated powers not given to the federal government automatically goes to the states. So if we do need any further regulations, defer it to the states. That's constitutional. We get individual rights, religious rights, and states' rights. Let's move on to the second voting issue of net benefits. Second voting issue is net benefits. First of all, we avoid a fiscal crisis as well as a medical device and medical provision crisis by repealing the critical parts of Obamacare, which would do all the damage that all teams agree on. What we don't agree on is whether or not we should force companies to act against their will, a violation of the Constitution, which both teams agree is the only thing that matters, the primary thing that matters in this debate round, that everything should be decided upon first. Second of all, benefits offset. Benefits offset. They can talk all they want about how this pre-existing condition coverage is going to be great, but the benefits are most likely going to offset, as she said, as the member said in her speech. There's going to be benefits, of course, from keeping the pre-existing condition clause. However, if you agree with the rest of our case, things are probably going to offset that as well. Third point under this is that we get everything. We get all the moolah, we get all the doctors, we get all of the things. Because here's the thing. If the moving target is bad, then you should vote against us both. But don't do that. The team actually wants that. If the argument is that you should vote against us because I wasted her entire speech, you should vote against them because you wasted all fun. The impacts really stand that the violations of the Constitution are the worst thing that can happen. There's only one team in this debate round which garners support of the Constitution. Because it's the only thing that matters in this debate round, because both teams agree upon that, and this includes NITOC and government ballot. Thank you.
Everyone